It's been a long time since we've done a video on the BC-1. So basically, when you get one, it'll be crated, and when you uncrate it, it'll be strapped to the base of the crate like this and protected with styrofoam. And once you unpack it, we'll show you what's all involved. When you unpack your roaster, there'll be a box that has several parts in it. A chaff fan with a pipe connector that attaches to it to allow you to connect it either to a flexible temporary piping, like if you're using it in your garage, or I've got the hiccups today. Or you can attach it to permanent piping. If you're going to attach it to permanent piping, pellet stove piping, if I could say it, is great because it's 3-inch piping. Also, if you're doing the temporary, you get a clamp with that. This is a Bluetooth dongle that some computers require you to plug into the USB port if you're wanting to connect to Artisan via USB. Also, you'll get a USB cord as well. If you decide to buy the optional mag airflow gauge, you can see our other video on how to attach it. Basically, it's a clamp that attaches to the back of the roaster, and then a connector that goes into the neck of the roaster, and then a silicone tubing that will bring the air to your magnehelic gauge so that you can monitor your airflow. So after you unpack your BC-1, you can put the hopper on top. You'll notice the new models now are different than the older BC-1. It's all one piece. Since these roasters are under about 70 pounds, we decided it was easier to put into one piece. Also, you'll want to install your chaff fan on top. There are 3 thumb screws that we generally put in a bag in case you want to attach the chaff fan to the chaff unit using the thumb screws. Personally, I don't like to use them because it discourages people from lifting the chaff fan off of the unit and cleaning it regularly, and that's very important to do. So you may or may not want to use those, but they are provided in a bag, generally in the box with the chaff fan, or packed along with the roaster. And you basically just set this on. One nice thing about the chaff fan and the BCs is that it can be turned in different directions to accompany how your exhaust system needs to be hooked up, either this way, that way, or completely going out the back. And then this is an aviation plug that plugs into the very back of the unit, just like with the BC-2 and others. So basically, roasting with the BC-1 is basically similar to what it was before the manual damper was put in, except for now you control all your airflow through the manual damper. So if you've watched any of the BC-2, 3, or 5, it's going to be very similar. Now, because the BC roaster, we wanted to make it with commercial components, we couldn't put all the same commercial components on it as we do on the BC-2 and others. So you've only got 1 ohm run temperature control, and no drum speed control. So today we're going to be roasting, if you can see it, about a pound of Columbia, and that's the maximum limit on the BC-1. The BC-1 can roast from basically 3 ounces to a pound. And so first we're going to preheat the roaster and get it ready. We've already plugged it in. We have it plugged in directly to 220, but with this, when you buy one, you'll get a 110 converter, so you can run it off of 110. You'll need to buy your own propane tank, and if you do buy a propane roaster, we highly recommend you buy the regulator from us, because you'll get a pro-crimped gas line and a much higher quality regulator than what they sell in the store. So we're going to take you through a roast. Initially you have to preheat the roaster, so we're going to go ahead and get it started and then do some preheating. So to start the roaster, you've got your power switch right here, which when you turn that on, it automatically turns on the Omron control, turns on the drum spinning, and if you've got the fan here turned on, which if you don't, you'll want to turn it all the way up to 100. That gets your fan airflow going, and then from now on you'll control all your airflow through the manual dial damper. We have another video about the BC-2 that talks about setting up and using the Magna-Helix gauge. This is the place where it would attach if you decide to buy that optional part. It's got a lot of advantages, so we encourage you to consider it. This is our gas flow, so we got to make sure our tank is turned on. If you're using natural gas, you'll have it hooked into a natural gas line. This is our gas gauge. It shows the pressure of the gas on an LPG. You want one that goes up to about 5 or 6 kPa. Natural gas only goes up to about 1 or 1.5 or 1 3/4 in most situations. So you can still use this gauge, or you can get another one that allows you to do micro adjustments. So to turn it on, you turn it counterclockwise. This is to turn the gas needle valve on. It won't let gas into the roaster until you hit the igniter, and then when you hit the igniter, which it says baking button on this particular machine, you may need to adjust the gas. You can tell by watching the gauge and the airflow to get it started. So we got plenty of pressure, and it actually lit really fast. Sometimes you got to fool around on your initial start and adjust the airflow. You'll know when it lights, you'll hear it by the sound, but you'll also see the red button stay red, and you can also through the viewing window see the gas, and then you can watch the gas pressure. So what we're going to do right now is crank it up fairly high to preheat the roaster, and I like to preheat it on the initial roast a lot higher than what I would normally roast at, because it's really not going to give you the true temperatures of the metals in there on the initial roast. It's just going to give you the temperature of the air hitting that being probe. While the roaster's preheating, I'll tell you a few of the features about the BC-1. There have been some changes. As I mentioned, it's all one component now. One of the biggest changes, which mainly affects maintenance, is in 2019 we eliminated the sealed bearing on the front. We put a open bearing, which needs to be greased every month and a half or 150 hours. The reason why we did that is the open bearings that are greased, as long as properly maintained and taken care of, they'll last much longer than the sealed bearings. You also see you've got your trier spoon. It's a pretty big trier spoon for a small roaster, so you can actually get pretty good samples out of there as you're doing a roast, in case you wanted to roast a pound and maybe like at increments of after you've gone in the first crack, at increments of every 15 or 30 seconds, you want to take a couple spoonfuls and lay them out in sequence on the table so that you can do a variety test from just one roast. What's new since our last videos is the manual dial damper. We control airflow through that, and especially when you're using it in conjunction with the magnehelic gauge, you're really able to see exactly what kind of airflow you're getting through the roaster. Pretty much not a whole lot other than that has changed on the roasters. So we're going to go ahead and take you through a roast in just a moment. My normal charge time for regular coffee is somewhere in the 350 to 400 degrees. But as I mentioned, during the first roast, unless you want to give it a 20-minute preheat, which I personally don't get into doing, I like to preheat my roaster up to a much higher temperature and then cut off the gas pressure, turn down the airflow, and see how quickly it drops. That gives me a much better idea of what the temperatures are in the drum. Like right now, it's almost 450 degrees at the probe on the BT, which is right here. And so I'm kicking it off, I'm cutting down my airflow. I'm going to wait a minute or so to see how far it drops, and then I'll decide whether it's hot enough in there to go ahead and charge my 1 pound of Columbia coffee. One thing that the BC-1s don't have that the BC-2 and up do is a timer. So you can either get a little portable digital timer, or you can use your phone timer to keep track of things, and that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to turn that to my iPhone, and when I get ready to charge the beans, I'll start the timer there. Right now, the way it looks, I think I'm going to be in pretty good shape, so I'm going to go ahead and kick my gas back on. And at this point, I'm turning the pressure down to about 3 1/4 kPa, and I'm going to go ahead and start my timer. Then I'm going to charge the beans, close the hopper after the last bean jumps in, and turn my airflow up to about 2. And now we're going to watch as the roaster, those cooler beans drop into the drum of the roaster and the temperature drops. We're going to see how long it takes for the turn. I don't know how well you can see this, but on my iPhone there, I should tip it up. Well, I seem to want to flip over, but we're watching as the temperature bottoms out. Usually 1:15 to 1:30 it will bottom out. Looks like it's about ready to right now. It's 197.4 at 1 minute 9 seconds. So now we got the turnaround going. Now my goal is, generally speaking, to try to allow the drying phase to last about 5 minutes. On smaller roasters, sometimes I'll go a little less than 5 minutes, maybe 4, or I may decide to draw it out a little longer, maybe 6 or so. But based on how that rate of rise is going, and if you had it tied into a computer, which the BC-1 will attach to Artisan via a USB or Bluetooth on a Bluetooth laptop, Artisan nicely gives you a predictive feature, so that it basically says if you keep everything the way it is, and it has like a dot, this is where you're going to be in 5 minutes, this is where you're going to be in 10 minutes. And while that's constantly adjusting, it gives you a pretty good idea of what your rate of rise is and whether you need to turn up the gas or turn it down. With all that said, we're at 2 minutes and 20 seconds at 243 degrees. So I think I'm at a pretty good rate of rise. I'm at 3 1/4 kPa. My airflow is at slightly under 2. I'm going to bump it up a little bit above 2 because I know this roaster or this coffee gets a decent amount of chaff. So we're going to keep an eye on that. I'll check back in a minute and we'll see where we are. So here we are. We haven't made any adjustments. We're at 4 minutes 18 seconds at 322 degrees. So we're going to hit our end of our drying phase, which is 330 degrees at just a little over 4.5 minutes. So here we are, 330 degrees at 4 minutes 33 seconds. So at this point, I'm going to crank down my gas a little bit because I don't want it to continue rising at that speed. So I'm going to move my little iPhone and crank this down, maybe 2.5, and I'm going to crank up my airflow to about 5. Let's see how that goes. If I think that it's still rising too fast, which I almost do at this point, I'm going to crank the gas down a little bit more, to maybe 2.25, and I'm at about 5 on the airflow. One of the things that doesn't come with the BC-1 is a fan, or not a fan, a lamp. So you can maybe buy one of those clamp-on $10 lamps or $15 lamps from Amazon and use those, the battery-operated ones or rechargeable ones. And that way you can get a better view of your roast. So here we are at almost 6 minutes, 6 minutes, 369 degrees. So we probably are getting the development of the mallard phase quite well. I don't know how well you can see that, but a nice, very light brown. And this coffee, I believe, goes into first crack somewhere close to between 385, maybe between that and 400 degrees. So here we are at 6 minutes 35 seconds, 380 degrees. I'm going to bump up my airflow to 6 because I can tell that there's more smoke being generated. As you look, you can see the chaff isn't too bad at this point, so the airflow has pulled it out quite well. Here we are, first crack 386 at almost 7 minutes, so that's good. So I'm not going to do any major adjustments right now other than maybe bump up my airflow to maybe 7. And what you don't want to do is bump up your airflow too high to where it slows down the momentum of the roast, unless that's what you want to accomplish. And you don't want it to stall out, though, to where it hardly picks up at all. And I don't see an issue with that, leaving it at slightly over 2 kPa. So we're at 7 minutes 31 seconds. It's just now beginning to go into a little bit more of a rapid first crack. I'll be quiet so you can hear it. So here we are at 8 minutes 6 seconds, 402 degrees. I just did a roast in the BC-2 with this exact coffee, and I took it up to a little bit above 415 degrees in about 10 minutes. I wasn't trying to race through the roast, but that's kind of the target I'm going on here. It's now 405 degrees at 8.5 minutes. I'm bumping my airflow up a little bit more to 8. As you can see, it's a nice, still a pretty light brown. Some people like to take their Columbia darker, but I think this is a nice Columbia at about 415 to 430 degrees. We're just now at 9 minutes, 408 degrees. So this is going to be right about on target to what my roast was that I just did in the BC-2 of the exact same. So I've slowed down the rate of rise by increasing the airflow and keeping the kPa down. We're at 410 degrees, just now 411 degrees at 925 at 2.25 kPa, 8 on the airflow. So I'm looking at right around a little bit less than 10 minutes So here we are, almost at, we're at 414 degrees. Looks good. And 9 minutes. Well, now we're at 9:56 at 416. So I'm about ready. I'm about to the point where I want to drop the beans. So we're at 420, 10 minutes, 16 seconds. I'm turning off the gas or the baking button. I'm turning on my cooling tray. And now I'm going to drop the beans. There we go. There's 1 full pound of very delicious Colombia coffee. Now, as soon as the last bean jumps out, that you should have your hopper full and you're ready to do another roast. You close the drum back up, you charge your next beans. It's right at about 365, which is right in that range. And so you can start up your gas, maybe crank it up to where it was in your last roast, or maybe you can leave it right at where it was. And you can judge that on the rate of rise. But this will cool in about 2 to 3 minutes, and you're good to go. And don't forget, at the end of the day, when you're done roasting, open up your hopper, open up your drum door, turn up your airflow all the way to 10, and let the roaster cool down to about 110, 120 degrees before you turn it off. That way it cools completely. You don't have to worry about buildup of heat in the drum over time, heading toward the electronic components, and then you'll be able to take care of your roaster for years to come. So that's pretty much a look at the BC-1 with the manual dial damper.